What's up, everybody? This is PrefixWiz coming back at you with another Unity tutorial. Continuing our series with C# coding. In today's topic, we're going to start Unity C# coding from scratch.
Counting double-digit thousands.
Starting C# for Unity from scratch. Okay, first I want to make a disclaimer here. I am not a natural programmer. I hated programming when I first started it because I simply couldn't get my head around it. And for many years, I've had different people try to teach me, and it was extremely hard for me to hear. Not because they didn't do a good job or they didn't know what they were talking about, but because the way I think, I just couldn't grasp my head around it. There is a difference between how a programmer thinks and, let's say, an artist, or how a pianist thinks differently from maybe a football player. We just think differently. We learn differently as well, and because of that, I want to bring C# to you the way I needed to hear it. You're not going to hear a whole lot of technical terms from me, but I will teach you how to use C#. Once you get the hang of it, you're going to be like me, where you can get to the point making a game is not hindered on coding. So let's go ahead and create a C# script. Right click on the asset folder, create C# script, and we'll call this variables, and just hit enter, and then double click to open it in MonoDevelop. Okay, once it's open in MonoDevelop, we're going to look at a couple of things real quick. First, let's just delete this stuff that you don't need to worry about. Okay, so let's look at the name what we named the script. What we named it outside automatically puts it right here. We named it variables, and right here is the name variables. So if that name is ever different from the actual script name, the actual name of the script, which is right up here, if that name is ever different, you're going to get an error. It has to be the same. We're in what we call a class. Every time you create a script, it's called a class. Okay. Now again, we're not going to get very technical about it, but right here it says public. And what we're trying to state, with the very first thing it states right off the back, when anything is public or private, when dealing with code, we're talking about what is accessible from other classes, from other scripts, and grab stuff out of it, grab information out of it, read, write, whatever. Next to it, we have the word class. Now that defines what we started. We actually called a class, we named a class variable. When we created a C# script, we created a class. Now, think of a class like a regular classroom. Just like a regular school, you can only have one classroom of the same type, of the same name. You can't have two classroom number ones, otherwise we won't know where to go when we need to get your student. Or when I'm looking for the class as a new student, I wouldn't be able to find the class. You cannot have two classes of the same name. All right, then you have the actual name of the class, variables, and of course you have the mono behavior. That's something that you don't need to know about right now. You'll learn about it another time. Just know that mono behavior is what we're using to write the code. All right, so moving on. We need to have almost every single script, almost every single script is going to have a variable. And think of variables as the individual desks inside the room, or the teacher's desk, or the classroom closet, if there is a closet inside the classroom. Okay, and inside those is a space. That's what a variable is. We're leaving space for something to be contained in it. Okay, so what we have here is 4 of the most typical types of spaces you're going to use, variables that you're going to use. You're going to use a game object type of space, an int type of space, a float type of space, and a string type of space. And each one of these cubby holes, lockers, drawers, they all hold something specific. This holds game objects, this holds whole numbers, this holds fractions, and this holds alphanumeric text. Directly after each space or variable, we have a name. So we have to name the variable. We have to actually name the closet, or name the desk that we're working at. We have to name it so that we know where to find it later, because we're storing that information for a reason. Now we have to figure out where to go get it. A game object, think of a game object, and this is a general rule, not 100%. There's always an exception. But think of a game object as anything that has a transform in the inspector is a game object. Then you have int. An int stores whole numbers. So if you know you have 15 pencils, or you know you're going to have between 1 and 10 and not 10 and a half or not 5 and a half, then int is where you want to be because you're collecting whole numbers. Float is the same as int except for it's able to accept those fractions. So if it's possible that you're going to come out with a fraction of a number, for instance, you're looking for 5, but you could potentially get 5.2 or 5.3, then it needs to be a float. And then, of course, a string is an alphanumeric character that you're just displaying as text. Okay, so before we end this, the last thing we're going to do, and this is to help you get familiar with what we're looking at, what we're dealing with, and how it translates to the Unity editor, is we're going to write the word public in front of each of these variables. Now remember, we talked about public earlier. This just makes it accessible from somewhere else. If you do not write the public, C# and Unity automatically defaults it to private. You don't have to actually type private. You can type private if you want to, but it automatically defaults it to private if you do not state that it's public. So let's go ahead and save this as is, and let's go into Unity. And then what I want you to do is select the main camera, and then I just want you to go down here to the variables script and drag it right onto it. So now you've added this class, this script called variables, to the main camera. So the main camera is an object because it has a transform. We talked about this. And then you look down here and you see the class variables is now a component of this game object. So we're able to see what's going on in this class now, also because we made it public. So that's the difference between public and private. If we went back and took all the publics off, you would not see this. But we can see it now and we can manipulate it right here because we made it public. Okay, so what is a game object? Let's say, well, obviously this is a game object, has a transform. This is a game object, has a transform. So let's just create another game object just because. We're going to create a 3D, let's do a cube. And there's our cube in the scene here. Okay, if you don't see it, just go 0, 0, 0, or click on the cube and hit F and it will focus on it. Okay, so there's our cube. And now we're going to take that cube and let's go ahead and click on the main camera again. Now remember, we had a public game object that we're referencing, that we're storing. Well, what we're going to do is store this cube. So we can drag that game object in there. Now notice, because this is a game object, we can put it in there, right? But let's say, for instance, it wasn't a game object. So let's go back to main camera, and you see like where it says pencils, we were looking for an int, right? But now we can't drag that in there. We can't drag the pens in there either. Or we can't drag this script into pens or your name. Now we can't put it in game object either. So let's try to drag the cube down here in the int. Well, that doesn't work. Pens, well, that doesn't work either. And of course, the string can't do that either. So, what do we do? Let's see here. Let's click on camera again. Let's make sure that we're, well, what we can do is change pencils, the amount. Okay, all right. So let's go to 100. Okay, so now we have 100 pencils. We're storing 100 pencils somewhere. Okay, and it's in a class called variables, in a variable itself called pencils. We're storing 100 of them. Okay, so that's the amount. Now let's say, how many pens did we have? Well, we had 100, right? Cool. But what about that half of one? I forgot about that half of one. So 100.5. Okay, so we have 100.5 in there because it is a float. We are able to do that. So when we go up and down on a float, notice the decimal space. All right, so that's the difference between a float and an int, whole number and a fraction. Okay, and then of course your name. Okay, because nothing else would fit in there. We can't change it. We can put numbers in there because, again, numeric characters are still a text. It's not holding a space of 10,000 of the value of 10,000. It's holding 10,000 the text. Okay, same as if I were to put PrefixWiz. Okay, so if we were to save everything and go back to main camera, it's all still there exactly how we left it because it's storing that information. That's what a variable is. And that's what we're going to be using in most of our scripting to make things happen. All right, so in our next tutorial, we'll go ahead and put those variables to use. Thanks for watching this video. I hope this and future tutorials get you on the path to building great projects. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe.